So, hello, Internet family. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as Adam's Rib, and you are listening to Fridays Live at Midnight. So, I had a couple scriptures lined up, but I'm going to save them for Monday night. But I want to discuss a little thing, a little dynamic that goes on in male-female relationship. Actually can go in any relationship where someone is attracted to someone else. And it's a little thing called the dance. So we didn't study it, but it was mentioned when I was doing my undergrad at Ohio Dominican University. And I was studying human sexuality. And we were discussing the whole issue of sexual harassment, rape, culture, and consent. So there's a little dynamic that many men like to play with women. I remember our teacher talking about the fact that some women like to be chased. They like to be pursued. That's not what we're talking about tonight. And liking to be pursued would mean that you were interested in the person back. I'm talking about women letting men know that they're not interested. So the dance is this little thing that men tend to do when they don't want to listen to you and don't want to hear you when you tell them no. And don't want to be bothered. And so part of rape culture, one of the myths in rape culture is that women secretly like unwanted attention. Okay, if it is unwanted, then you can't secretly like it. Because it is not secretly liking to be chased, which most women aren't. And it really is a lie that many men tell themselves so that they can continue to keep pestering women or pressing women into having sex with them. And it's an excuse to continue to keep ignoring women when they say they're not interested in something or they're not interested in it yet, or what have you. So, and especially, it's really a form of supernatural warfare. Because one of the things, I remember the first church I belonged to, opportunities to sin or do behaviors that are considered a sin. Let's say you're a single woman. You are saving sex for marriage. You are doing your dutiful little Christian girl thing. And all of us, it seemed like none of the single men are living in such a way. You don't seem to have a good rapport with the single men around you. But the married men, oh my God, if they were single, they would be your dream man. So the first church I belonged to, that was a little thing called a lie of Satan. So a lie of Satan is something that challenges your faith, undermines your faith, and makes you want to give up living right. When men come around you and say hoes are winning, that's a lie. And it's another way of trying to discourage you from saving it, because it's another way to have you saying, well, what's the use? Blah, blah, blah. And the devil will arrange for a bunch of men who aren't living right to be all up in your ear, be all up in your face, and saying really, really discouraging things to you. I saw one such thing this week. A guy posted something on TikTok, and he was putting together this recipe for dark-skinned black women, and put, like 80% violence. And it was another way of trying to discourage dark-skinned black women and to make them feel unattractive. Like I've said in the past, verbal abuse is a form of supernatural warfare, because the purpose of verbal abuse is to make you feel undesirable. And it's to undermine your confidence in your ability to, number one, turn down a abusive relationship. It is also a way to keep you from leaving. So, and you have to be careful because people have agendas. So, one lie is to make like you're more violent than light-skinned women simply because you're dark. Okay, all dark-skinned women are violent. All dark-skinned women are not violent. And it's really a extension of the stereotype about black people being violent. And many times black people are inherently labeled as violent simply because they're black and not because of any violence that they've actually done. And this is usually like, say, the incident in Alabama where the black man and his captain were trying to get this boat to move so that some passengers that legitimately were supposed to be parking their boat there could park their boat there. And I remember I said to someone, I don't think that people understand what it's like to have someone be belligerent and uncooperative simply because you're black. And not because you're asking them for anything unreasonable, not because you're making a really, really bad request, but because you're black. And if a white person, especially white male, made any of these same requests toward them, they would have no problem. But because the person who is making the request is black, they now have a problem. So I remember working at a salon, and I was, waiting, I had a customer in my chair, but I didn't, and one of my coworkers was on the phone. And so I'm making that motion because I hate when people are on the phone and a customer comes in and they wouldn't put down the damn phone to wait on the customer. I think that is so freaking rude. Okay? They wouldn't put, and one of my other coworkers had said the same thing. She was like, don't you hate when they get on that damn phone and they won't put, whoever you are talking to ain't going nowhere. And it doesn't hurt you to say, just a moment, someone just came in, or what are you, especially if one of your coworkers is busy with a customer. I could see if I wasn't doing nothing. And, then, yes, it's my job to get off my behind and go up front and wait on the person. That's just us working together. But she didn't say nothing. And so I tried to wait a little minute to give her a chance to wait on this person. And she didn't. And so I was like, fine. Because I hate behavior like that, because that's that passive aggressive nonsense of making you look like the rude person. So I, said, hold on for just a moment, to the person in my chair. And I said, sir, can I help you? So he ignores me. And so I finally said again, sir, can I help you? And so once again, ignored. Now, this was one of those situations where there was safety in numbers, because there was a whole lot of people. There were people up in our front area, in our waiting area, that saw this whole thing go down. and plus the person in my chair. And much as I hate to make it sound like, white people's word being validated over a black person, because it shouldn't matter what color their skin are, but these people were white. And I'll tell you why in just a second. So this guy, I said, well, I'm going to give him a third time. And the person heard me wait. And the person that I was working with heard me waiting on this person and still didn't put down the phone long enough to greet this person and ask him and say, may I help you, dog, kiss my foot, whatever. Once again, she left me hanging and she was white. Sometimes I swear racist white people have a freaking meeting on what can we do to make the workplace as unbearable as possible for black coworkers. How can we get together and make them look belligerent, make them look loud, make them fit every stereotype that we've already engineered against them? So she still was on the phone and still didn't greet this guy, didn't say nothing. So I was still left trying to get this guy greeted and signed in or waited on or what have you. So on the last time I said, sir, can I help you? And this guy went off, started yelling. She was still on the phone, still wouldn't put the freaking phone down. Made me want to choke her. So he's yelling at me and blah, 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 blah. And I want to be waited on by her, not you, her, blah, 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 blah. And so I was like, and so the person in my chair was like, who pissed in his cornflakes this morning? And so the other people, and so finally, one of the guys that was up front said and this was my assistant manager that this happened with, usually most managers are the person, if you go to a fast food place, they're usually the ones all up in your face, giving you the shop, doing whatever to wait on you. And so finally, the one guy that was up front said, ma'am, she tried to wait on him 3 times and he completely ignored her. Now, there seems to be a trend in one of the churches I used to go to where they're kind of testing black women. I don't approve of it, and I don't approve of it because it's really a way of grooming black women into being more passive. Okay, and it's really a way of trying to give men unfair advantages over women. It's really, really chauvinistic. I don't agree with it. I think if anything, women, period, need to be a little more assertive, especially when you're talking about supernatural warfare, because you got us coming under the authority of the devil. And I honestly believe, because some of these men, but when this happened, it's like, now you're doing this. And like the one man said, ma'am, I defended you. She said, and the bad thing is he was one of these people that if I'd have sat there and ignored him like she did, then there would have been, well, what do you hire these people for anyway? It's one of the reasons why I'm not anti-immigration. Not hating on no Latins or nobody else, because many of the things that I hear being said about immigrants are the same things that were said about black people if you wind the clock back. So you may wonder, well, what is the dance? Kind of goes with that same mentality of if you are not going along with everything that someone does, then you're loud, you're belligerent, you're this, you're that, or the other. And like I said, when you're talking about racism, like I have had incidences where people didn't want me waiting on them simply because I was black. And a lot of people, even black people, like to act like that's not a dynamic anymore. It's still a dynamic, but it's going kind of underground. I hope to do a podcast this week about microaggressions and talk about the little stuff that people do when they either don't want you waiting on them or they don't want to wait on you. And some of these teachings really kind of allow racism to fester, because if you confront a behavior, then you become the B word. If you tell somebody you're not comfortable with how they're acting. I remember being riding our public transportation and a person getting upset because I had my bag beside me. And so, well, that's so rude, blah, 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 blah. Do you know how many microaggressions or do you know how many violations to our personal space that women endure on a regular basis? And many of those are racial. Okay? If you've ever had to deal with somebody who felt justified in doing things to you, like I said, this guy felt justified acting rude and acting like he acted because he simply didn't want a black person waiting on him. And my coworker, back when I first started working, people were a little more sensitive to that kind of thing. And so if they saw you trying to be courteous, they went ahead and got off the phone and talked to the person. And so I'm like, okay, this has got to be warfare. And so, their answer was to give this guy a free, gift certificate to a haircut. Like, I'm like, you just rewarded this person for cursing out and insulting your employee. Like, how does that work? And I remember having to talk to somebody about that one time, and they were like, well, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but now it makes us feel less secure because they're being rewarded for being rude. But, for me, that was my example of dealing with somebody who did not want a black person waiting on them. Or worse, well, I won't say worse, but just as bad is the guy who acts like you're automatically not supposed to know or have knowledge about anything that isn't traditionally feminine. So there was a clip of a professional athlete and a female sports journalist was discussing sports with him. Yeah, I think it was Cam, what's his name? Cam Newton, I think it was. And so the woman said a term, and he giggled and said, you said such and such. And so, someone posted it, and so I replied, and I said, it's sexist. Because would he have said that to a man? Would he expect that a man, a male sports journalist would not know the terminology? Especially since most male sports journalists used to be athletes themselves. And I have to say that women in sports journalism have come a long way, because I can remember years ago, a woman went into a locker room. I remember the days when women in sports who report sports in the field had to sue for the right to be able to go into locker rooms and do interviews. Yeah, there was a time where, you could go everywhere else. Women in sports journalism, have come a long way. And I do remember that. I remember, all of the stuff that you see women being allowed to do now. At one point, somebody had to enter a lawsuit just to be able to do your job. Just to be able to do a job that you were hired to do. That's when you know the stuff is real. So I say this because many of the stuff that you hear, like sexual harassment, different other stuff, are part of the dance. They're part of the dance. So the dance is, let me weaponize power, let me weaponize promotion, let me find whatever I can do to make you do something you don't want to do, especially sexually. So I can remember years ago, I was at this church, and I told women, and I said to women, if an offer comes to you and the offer is coupled with an offer for you to sleep with that person, that whole casting couch thing, which is also part of the dance, I don't take those offers seriously. And I don't take them seriously because they're really a way of weaponizing resources to get sex. They know that you study for whatever it is you're doing. They know that you're hungry for an opportunity to do what it is you are wanting to do. They know you want to be in ministry or some other job that you study for. They know you want to sing. They know that you have things you want to do. And so they use, or maybe it's you want to be married. And so they use your desires against you. Okay, you heard that with the whole Harvey Weinstein thing. You heard it with the Bill Cosby thing. Offers to mentor women in business so that they can get sexual favors. Or pretending to have a meeting, and with that meeting, the meeting is somewhere really completely inappropriate, because I don't believe in taking meetings in people's hotel rooms. So let me give you another example. At one point, I DoorDashed for money to bring extra income, or income period, because there were times I was doing it when I didn't have a full-time job. So dashing became my full-time job. So one of the rules I had for my own safety with my door dashing is if it was a hotel room, I did not go to men's hotel rooms. I absolutely refused. And there were men who were upset about it. I don't care. I value my safety over your ego. If you have a problem with me wanting to protect myself, then it makes me wonder what you were planning on doing, that you're upset that I don't want to come to your hotel room. And people can say, well, maybe it's inconvenient. I don't care how inconvenient it is. Like, you are a man, a full-grown man with more upper body strength than I have. I'm not about to come into a situation where I got to worry about you overpowering me and doing something to me that you have no business doing. And before you talk about anybody's level of attractiveness, rape victims, sexual assault victims come in every shape, size, color, and age, unfortunately. So part of the dance becomes them trying to persuade you. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you an example of something that I went through that many saved women, or women just in the world period, have had to deal with. And it also talks about going against your better judgment. So I happened to be at my apartment complex. I was walking outside. I think I was taking out my trash. And this guy tried to talk to me. Oh, you sold this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. And against my better judgment, I exchanged contact information with him. So in the meantime, he called me, and we, been talking on the phone a few times. And this is where it started. So the dance in this case is repeated attempts to see if he could come over to my place and spend the night. Now, I've already, told you I'm in church. So in church means, I'm not fooling around like that. And so he tried to come over at like 10, 11 at night. No car. My first clue should have been when he told me he was staying with his baby mama. for a place to live. So that means you don't have a place to live. You don't have a place to live. All right. And you don't have a car. So you don't have a way to get over to my place in the first place, or you're relying on somebody else to bring you over. So it's 10, 11 o'clock at night. My kids have had a 9 o'clock bedtime at the time. Sunday through Thursday, they were in bed by 9 o'clock, both of them. And so he continued to keep trying to come over at 10, 11 o'clock at night after they were already in bed. I was like, no, I think, you're going to have to come over another time, a more appropriate time, because my kids are in bed. I'm not waking them up so that I can come and take you. I'm not waking them up so that I can take you back over, and you are not spending the night here. And so he was like, but I really want to see you. And there are 7 days in a week. This mug could have seen me, and you could see me anytime. Why are you trying to come over this late? Now, there's a saying that there's nothing open after midnight except for legs. And after a certain hour of night, they're not trying to take you out for ice cream. Like, I'm over falling for men's stuff. And so I said no. And so he continued to keep talking, and I'm like, no. And so then I had to hear how I was forcing my religion onto him. And I'm like, okay, how is that happening? Because I barely mentioned Christ to you, and you're busy trying to get in my bedroom. I saw it for what it was. And so he said, well, when can I see you? I said, well, there's always the possibility of going to church. You can see me there because I'm there a lot. And so, I said it in a joking manner because, like, most people would recognize. And so he continued to keep it up. And so it's like, it seemed like he went through a thing. He went through a systematic thing of every time he would call me at like some hour where my kids were already in bed. Like I said, do people ever visit people on Sundays anymore or on the weekend? Like everybody, it seemed like every time you turned around, he was trying to come over at 10, 11 o'clock at night. And he tried this, I would say, probably about 4 days that week. So finally, I talked to one of our female pastors, who had a little bit of life experience she was a single mom at one point and had a little bit of life experience when it comes to that type of thing. And so she said, well, what do you want to happen? Because I can hear the lack of peace in your voice. So he's starting to really get on your nerves. And so we prayed together, and I prayed him away. I just more or less said, I just want him to go away. Because I really, when you have successfully saved it for a number of years, the last thing you want is for somebody to drag you back into having to have them type of exchanges. Okay? You get tired after a while. Like, I don't like having them type of exchanges with men. And I don't have the patience for it. Like back when I was younger, I might have that conversation. And really, to be perfectly honest with you, I think back when I was younger, it usually resulted in me hanging up in their faces more often than not because I can't stand that exchange. And I think it is so disrespectful. I think it is very disrespectful for someone to know your beliefs. And, more often than not, this happens in Christianity a lot. People are, we get accused of, and I'm like, well, what do you think you're doing? Like I was on this famous comedian's post. And so I talked about, the difference because really we're not called to bully people into liking Christ. We do have the Great Commission where we are, I won't say we're required, but one of our mandates is to win people to Christ. Something that really I enjoy doing. I enjoy, praying with people to receive Christ. When I remember something that comedian Penn Jillette said one time on a post, and he said, and if you're wondering who Penn Jillette is, he's part of Penn and Teller. He said he was an atheist, and he said I don't believe in God, but if I did believe in God, and I believe that Jesus was the way to get to heaven and spend eternity with God, I would share it. I would share that word with everybody that I could, very vigorously. So I actually do believe. And when I can, I do share politely. You know, I don't believe in beating people over the head with the gospel. But the funny thing to me is the number of people that don't believe and don't see anything wrong with trying to force their lifestyle onto you. And I said, what do you think an invitation to fornicate is? Because I don't think that men in or out of church recognize how vigorously they evangelize dick. Can you imagine how quickly our churches would grow? Can you imagine how fast the churches in North America alone would grow if men evangelized Jesus as much as they evangelize dick? And I'm saying in or out of church. Think about the number of pastors who get caught up in sex scandals or get caught up in sexual misconduct. Think about the number of pastors that make up false prophecies, and the sole purpose of that prophecy is to get a woman to sleep with them. I had to finally tell a pastor out of a church that I wound up leaving, you do know that offering women promotions within your church in exchange for sexual favors is quid pro quo sexual harassment, right? You do know that that's a harassment, and you do know that it's against the law, that they can go to at least civil court on you because that's illegal. And you do know that that is not protected under freedom of religion. And oh my God, I had to, Lord, my God, we repent. I'm like, how do you not know that? And this man had 2 lawyers, 2 women who studied law as part of his congregation. Now, I guess, going to one of them is saying, what happened to me if I do blah, blah, blah. But like, wouldn't you rather know? So you don't get on the wrong side of the law. Not only is it illegal, it is also a sin. Because, we read our Bible. What do most Christian churches teach about sex outside of marriage? With anybody. It is a sin. It is a sin. It is a sin. Okay? And it is a sin for both men and women. So I'm always a little shocked at the number of, and I'm talking about people who are supposed to be Christian. I'm not even talking about all these other religious beliefs that really, I'm like, every time I think about some of these cults, I think about this episode that I remember watching here recently from What's Happening. And so Rerun, one of the characters, fell into this cult, and they were worshiping a head of lettuce. And the head of lettuce's name was Ralph. And so they found out that the woman that was over the cult was a scam artist from back in the day. And so I think it was Ron or whatever, the guy who owned the diner that they went to on a regular basis. He was like, she's still up here scamming people. He said, what's the latest con? And the latest con was a religion called Ralph. And I'll be honest with you, there are some Christian churches that you may as well be worshiping Ralph for all of what goes on in some of them. And so, like I said, once again, the dance. You done already told me, you done already told the person, you done already told a man that you're saving it, which saving it is supposed to be part of your covenant with Christ. And so here comes the dance. Let me make up a false prophecy to try to convince you that God not only wants you to have sex with me, but also wants you to let my followers use you on their way to other women. So once again, or they start enlisting other people. And so, like I said, the dance. When are men going to recognize that it's better when things are consensual? Number one. But like I said, the dance. So the dance is, let me see what lies I can make up. I just recently saw a thing on YouTube where a girl had a posting, and the posting said, you must only date white guys. Now I said, let me say something. They know you ain't dating. They know that you're not dating white guys any more than you're dating black guys. When they say that, it's because you must have raised a standard that they didn't want to meet. So because they don't want to meet it, all of a sudden you're accused of liking white guys, like white men don't like sex and don't try to have sex with women they're not married to. Okay? Like white men don't try to fornicate with women. White guys try to fornicate with white women. So why do you think, and there's always, I don't know, it's like when I hear some stuff that comes out of men's mouths, I said it's really another way to put you on a guilt trip about turning them down, more than likely for sex. It's also another way of, shaming you because you raised up a standard that they don't want to meet. And so in order to shame you about that standard, they accuse you of liking white men. Or you must have only dated white guys because only white guys date that way, I guess. I don't know. It's usually not a well thought. Most dances are not usually things that are well thought out by the person who's trying it. And they might have tried it on a couple women that either wanted to sleep with them anyway. You'd be surprised at what women overlook if they think you're cute enough and want to bang you. Or women who don't have a whole lot of life experience, which is scary because that would say they were rather young. And so this amount of emotional manipulation and emotional abuse worked. Yeah. Like I said, the purpose of non-physical abuse, like verbal, emotional, and psychological, are either ways to manipulate you, or it's someone trying to undermine your sense of self-worth so that you don't feel worthy of anybody but them or their demographic. And so, like I said, all of these things, I'm going to talk about this more Monday, but a lot of it, like I said, is the dance. So the dance is the guy who is so determined to get sex from you that they start making up lies. And some of these lies have some very serious consequences. I'm not sure how somebody calls himself a real Christian and spends 90-some% of their time trying to get in your panties. And worse yet, there are women who help. And I do not understand women. I do not understand women who cooperate with that kind of abuse. Either you have, I'll give you an example. When Kevin Samuels, no, I'm not gonna say rest his soul. F him. And I'm gonna tell you why in a minute. So when Kevin Samuels was alive, he had this forum or this whatever panel. And on this panel were women of every color except black. And so he proceeded to go into this panel, and I asking why black women, he just seemed to have it in for black women, which is why very few black women felt sad when he left here. So the whole purpose of the panel was to beat up on black women, which I really believe there is supernatural warfare against us right now, sisters. I don't know what it is, but it seemed like there is this whole thing to try and attack black women, whether it's sexually, whether it's intellectually, professionally. Like, we are under some serious attack. I believe there's warfare against women, period. But that's a horse of another color. And I believe it's global, but I really do believe that, black women are being under some serious attack by some of these denominations. And I believe a few of these denominations have some really racist beliefs toward us. And they're beliefs that are grounded and rooted in white supremacy. Because I've heard some of this stuff in the past when I first got saved, and I was like, I know that there's no way that can be true. And I may talk about some of that because, like I said, right now, I'm also doing 11 months of Black history. So in talking about our place in the body of Christ and some of the very erroneous Christian teachings that have been out there about us, I think it's about time we confronted some of these lies. Many of the lies are to keep us out of the kingdom of Christ in the first place, because Satan will fight you on getting saved. Number one, Jesus is the truth, the way, and the light. There's no other way to the Father except through him. So if he can mess you up getting saved, he will. If he can keep you, I don't believe none of that mess. I still am a believer in Christ, and I'm not about to let nobody mess that up. So one of the things that I really don't like about cults is that they mess up you and God. I don't like nobody messing up you and God. That's one of the reasons why I've been coming hard against some of these teachings against single moms. If a group can keep you from believing God in the first place, or make it very hard for you to believe God, the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And one of the things he wants to destroy is your faith in God, or make it so hard and so legalistic that you wonder if you are ever pleasing God, or outright lie on God and make it seem like God is, saying things about you that he's not saying. So that's one of the reasons why I tell women everywhere, when you accept Christ, God calls you daughter. He's not calling you any other name. He's not verbally abusing you. He's not verbally bashing you. He's not telling you you're disqualified from marriage. And a lot of it has been very racist things against black women, basically trying to make us believe that we don't qualify to be married, or that other groups of women are more qualified to be married than we are. So anyway, back to Kevin Samuels in this panel. He had a panel full of every other color woman but black. And so the purpose of the panel was to bully black women and undermine our confidence by saying, why aren't we married? Now, there are plenty of legally married black women in the earth. I don't want to say marriage doesn't mean anything, because it does. But unfortunately, so many things are done to women in the name of marriage, that really the covenant that it is, the blessed state that it's supposed to be, is it more blessed than being single? It is not. In Christianity, we believe both single saved women and married saved women are blessed. There's no difference in your status. So anyone that tries to make you feel like you're less saved or less important to God than married women are, they are lying to you. Don't believe that lie. Single women are just as important to God as married women are. So the purpose of the panel was to undermine the faith of Black women, and it was meant, and he did it in such a way that he wanted to enlist other women to basically gang up on us and bully us. So I said, any woman that participates in that panel, like, you could not have the best self-esteem in the world that you don't see this for what it is. And yet it's part of the dance as well. It's another way of trying to undermine the faith of the women or confidence of the women. Was another attack on Black women. Another way of trying to make Black women feel like we're not worthy. So as soon as I heard this loser open up his mouth and say, I gave Black women 2 times. Now, 2 chances. So you've been married and divorced twice. So you couldn't keep us. You had 2 chances to keep one of us and couldn't. And you're hearing his side of it, so you already know. I'm like, oh, we would need to hear the ex-wives. I don't trust your account of things, no way. But like I said before, as a woman, don't participate in no stuff that is meant to degrade and denigrate other women. If it looks, and some stuff looks like borderline human trafficking. Okay, but some of this stuff, you have to band with other women. One of the best ways to band with other women is to witness to other women. Okay, praying with other women. Because let me say this much, from a global standpoint, women everywhere need the gospel. If you are a saved woman and you swear you're carrying the truth and Jesus lives on the inside of you, one way to help other women is to evangelize to other women. If you really believe that, now you are following me and you don't, hopefully I can convince you that he is the truth. But the bottom line is, why are you not interceding for women who are going through around the globe? Because many women are it's horrible in these female streets. So, I'm going to talk more about this whole phenomena called the dance on Monday. But like I said, the dance is really the behaviors that a lot of men make up because they're not thoroughly convinced that you don't want what they want, which is typically sex. It is a weird form of evangelism that keeps trying to sell you on penis. Like I said, if men in church just alone evangelize penis as hard as they evangelize Jesus as hard as they evangelize penis, think about how many people would be won to Christ. Because nobody seems to evangelize Jesus as hard as they evangelize penis. And I'm talking all colors. All of the energy. When I left one of the churches that I left, one of the things the Holy Spirit said to me was, if he'd have worked as hard trying to if he'd have worked as hard trying to get you and train you and mentor you for music ministry, for any type of ministry, think about how far you would have been. And said he chose to spend most of his time with you at his church, trying to convince you to sleep with different men at his church. That's one of the things that bothers me about the dance. Because it's really a man using his resources and everything else to get women to sleep with them, including making up prophecies and tailoring their teachings in such a way that it's meant to groom women. So anyway, I am going to get off here. I hope to have a better outlined, um, session for you guys on Monday. I will talk to you then. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your family, your loved ones, and everyone. Try to get into the habit of praying together. But I will talk to you guys later. You have a good one and be blessed.